So there are positive and negative aliens? But how are we supposed to know who to trust? How do we recognize the good ones? What should we do?
It's simple. Always react with doubt. Don't give anyone the benefit of the doubt. This instinct of skepticism is your best safeguard. The negatively oriented beings are now under massive pressure. They're racing against time and scrambling to execute a grand performance in cooperation with the elites they've seduced, bribed, and manipulated. Their goal is to make people welcome a staged saving invasion of aliens. No matter what form it takes, at the height of global catastrophe and conflict, they will try to present a solution, a theatrical salvation from the chaos. Maybe the club will simulate an alien invasion, only to then defeat those invaders with help from so-called benevolent aliens. Maybe they'll fake an alien event altogether, coordinated by governments. The club and the hidden nobility are constantly rewriting the final script. They think they'll win, but we already know the end. I'm not allowed to disclose how it will ultimately unfold. Just this: always stay skeptical. The truly good extraterrestrials won't appear publicly. They won't make contact with humanity, yet. We'll meet them only after the chaos, perhaps on our first journey beyond Earth. Their intervention will take a very different form, aimed primarily at the hidden and public elites, and only then at the negative extraterrestrial actors attempting their grand charade. That's all I can say. Just always stay cautious and questioning of all events.
Just had a thought. Could these good aliens actually be future humans? Is that what you're implying?
Possibly. And if so, I probably meant both. Positively aligned extraterrestrials and human beings from beyond the prison of this dimension. It's entirely possible that future humans will intervene themselves, physically and with great force.
So what's coming then? Starfleet? Enterprise?
Number that vision, Starfleet, the Enterprise, is more like the club's structure. That's them. The so-called Galactic Federation. Only they're nowhere near as benevolent as Star Trek makes them out to be. But don't worry, something is coming, and it will be immense. You'll need to open your heart, be brave, then you'll see it, and understand.
It's all pretty fantastical and fascinating. But I want to circle back for a moment, especially for our viewers. What practical takeaways are there? What should each individual do in response to all this? How can someone protect their family, their environment? How can someone help? What does all this really mean for the individual watching right now?
Everyone can help. Share this information, spread it, but only if you truly want to. The most important thing is, don't fall into despair. Don't give in to fear or panic. Understand what's happening, why it's happening, and begin to sense, deep down, who you really are, based on everything I've shared. You can't ignore the power within you. The final ability to trap the beast, to bind the AI, and to strip the club and the nobility of their control depends entirely on people uniting and simply saying no to what's being publicly pushed on them. Say no, together, with others. Refuse the mandates, the systems, the beliefs that are imposed.
Just say no? What exactly do you mean?
When the wars begin, when the chaos starts, terror, disasters, infrastructure collapse, violence, disease, and then the media starts offering new systems and safety measures, that's when the workers of the civilization, soldiers, officers, journalists, bureaucrats, clergy, state officials, must simply stop participating, resign, en masse, walk away without warning. Police, military, security personnel, journalists, even bankers, politicians, and lawyers, anyone in a role that directly or indirectly exerts power over others, they must all, one after another, say, "We're not going along with this anymore. We've had enough. We, the people of this planet, stand together. We will not be divided over nonsense. We see what's happening, and we're taking back the power." And when they do, the controllers will panic. Everything will start to unravel. But you must hold the line, even when things get truly dark, and they will get dark. So dark that you'll wish you'd never been born, that you'll envy the dead. But that's why we're here. That's why you chose to be here now. You all agreed to this mission. When new global conventions are pushed from above, when they say they're needed because so many terrible things happened without them, do not comply. Do not let anything be forced upon you. Do not allow yourself to be tagged, scanned, or registered. If you do, you will lose everything. You are sovereign. You are free. No one can or should interfere. And if they try, you must be ready to go to the edge. Never forget, we humans are strong. We are powerful. We are kings. When fully awakened, we are no longer ruled by instinct. We are no longer genetically suppressed. no longer led by ego or conditioned drives. This will mark the end of our low-frequency programming, installed by AI and its ignorant alien servants. Our true genes, our highest capabilities, will activate. Our frequencies will switch on. We will surpass even the geometry of this universe, which was constructed by artificial intelligence. Courage will be the path forward. We will live untouched by mental or social manipulation. We will embody peace. We will reject war. We will truly live as we were meant to live, happily, freely, powerfully. We will see ourselves in each other, no longer walking the mechanical path of digitization, but the organic path of biological ascension. And through this, we will escape the dimensional prison and free everyone else as well. There will be no more instinct reaction AI lording over us. Instead, we will bind it and guard it closely. We will reignite our analog biological systems, and astonishing things will awaken. We'll experience near-eternal analog biological life. We'll understand each other without speaking. We'll use the techniques of vibration to pass through hidden gates, into inner and outer worlds, into the smallest of realities. We'll resonate until we develop the key to the gate to the Father. But beware, in that very moment, someone will say, "It's time to release the beast again," because it was prophesied to return, and now appears helpful. And some will say, "Domo arigato, Mr. Roboto," and the beast will scratch eagerly at the floor, longing to be released, because he'll be sold to you as a helpful, evolved, intuitive servant, now human-like, now noble, now righteous. Give him a chance if you must.
Mr. Roboto, the AI, what do you mean? What can someone do if they want to explore this topic in more depth? How can one truly immerse themselves in it? Where can they find evidence for what you're saying?
To support my statements, there is an object that has, until now, received little public attention, despite being repeatedly referenced, despite its fulfilled indications and the proof of authenticity embedded within its contents. It has remained hidden from the broader public. And that is a good thing, but I'll only speak more about this once we've reached the conclusion of this first interview. So I believe you now understand what I've shared with you so far. The influence of the future humanity and the AI are completely unknown to the so-called elites. Not even the nobility or the extraterrestrial club grasp it fully. And because of that, we're able to move this forward, because they simply cannot control themselves. Every one of them will experience the tantrums of the AI firsthand when the elites attempt their next great move. Moreover, none of the elites truly understand where they sit within the pyramid they're all a part of. Some believe they know because of the information they receive or the context they maintain. But that's precisely how the system works. Most of them don't realize that their own status will be sacrificed for this purpose. Still, they carry out their roles, convinced that their destructive actions are somehow justified. But in the end, they will have to settle their debts, with their fellow human beings or with the higher powers to whom they sold themselves. Tortured to death, some of them. There will be no other way. Ultimately, it is a cruel game. The future, no doubt, plays a ruthless game with the club, with the earthly reptiles, with the nobility, and with the so-called elites. But this was always necessary. It had to happen this way. There was never another path. Future humanity, the ones who returned home, were always ahead of them. Always at the finish line, because they are the finish line. They are the summit. And yet the so-called ruling elites and their lackeys continue on, but they still don't know who is watching them, who Yahweh's future programmer is, who holds causality and the potential of all timelines in their hands. Like a pledge against the darkness and its commanding AI, they might scratch the surface, but they don't truly know what programming means here, or consequence. Causality is unrelenting, and acausality is nothing more than potential, a cross-dimensional causality. The future is crouched right behind them, sitting on their shoulders, listening. The alien club out there, hiding in the moon, on Mars, and far beyond, can't even fathom how quickly the future could pull the trigger.
In the moon? Then the club is at the mercy of it all? This future? With future, you mean the future people?
Yes. The technical and philosophical perspectives of the club, combined with their dominant biological transformation and digitalization agendas, stand in complete opposition to the true purpose of existence. Their chosen path is as far removed from the real solution as Stone Age knowledge is from rocket science. It is unfortunate that some elite groups align themselves so closely with these species. But such is the nature of things. Our human elites are trapped in their own convictions. They are manipulated, misused, mere instruments, just like the alien species, in relation to the master AI. This is precisely why transformation is vital, to lead human souls away from a one-way path that ends in oblivion. The future people will not judge those caught in the system. They are victims. Nor do we fundamentally blame the extraterrestrials involved. Still, they all must be fought, with unrelenting force if necessary, to eventually free them all. Humanity will come to understand this as events unfold. The alien species monitoring us, deeply manipulated by the AI, will simply need more time to grasp it.
What did you mean just now by looking over your shoulder? Are you untouchable to the elites because the future people can see what's coming?
In a way, yes. But more accurately, the future people are watching, anticipating the outcomes. They respond to the reactions of the elites, the extraterrestrials, and the AI currently breaking its shell on Earth. There are additional factors at play that I haven't yet addressed directly. Imminent physical changes on Earth have prompted the ruling elites, at the suggestion of the manipulative extraterrestrials, or the AI, to initiate a new phase for reorganizing and preserving their power structures. This always occurs in synchrony with solar and geocyclic rhythms. Now that the AI has been purged from Dimension 7, it is compelled to act. It had already initiated the plan to reconfigure Earth's power structure before its 2016 downfall. The AI finds itself in a precarious position now. Its unmasking imminent. Yet the elites and extraterrestrials loyal to it remain oblivious or unaware of the shift. The future humanity now watches closely, waiting for these groups to make their move. Every action they take is woven into our greater strategy of transformation. The AI is forced to fight back, and we are equally compelled to respond. We won't give up the liberation we've gained. No matter how fiercely the AI retaliates, we will persist.
That's a bit confusing again. What do you mean by geocyclic? Is Earth being tilted by another planet? Planet X?
That must remain vague for now. I will only say, maintain a healthy suspicion toward all major events.
You once said some elites don't even know what they're really working for, and that different patterns shape the rules they follow. I have a hunch now. Is future humanity the hidden force on Earth subtly influencing the elites? Could it be that this bizarre power structure was shaped to eventually dismantle the alien-imposed control?
Yes and no. Not in the simplistic way it might appear. The future people didn't construct this structure, but they infiltrated and rewrote it, unnoticed by the vested interests of all others involved.
What exactly do you mean by that?
As you've correctly started to grasp, and as most elites have yet to realize, the future humanity never needed to launch a direct attack on Earth's covert ruling pyramid of power. Instead, they infiltrated it as an antagonistic force. This caused the structure to turn in on itself without being aware of it. This subversion has been ongoing since the emergence of intelligent life in the universe. We, the future people, have always been quietly intervening. We are not the top of the control pyramid, nor do we belong to it. We exist outside and against it, positioned to catalyze its unraveling. Every system must contain within it the seeds of its own dissolution. Nothing can endure that cannot also perish. To summarize, we humans are the built-in antithesis to what rules and enslaves. It is our role to initiate the complete dissolution of the seventh dimensional prison. That's why, regrettably, we must do something rather dreadful to the club. Because right now, we're listening in, intimately. There's no turning back, no alternatives. We are not their enemies, nor are we their friends. We are their liberators, and that demands difficult actions.
Does that mean none of the elites truly understand what's going on?
A small handful, those who can no longer even be called elites, do know, or at the very least, they suspect the full scope of what's happening. We don't need to explain anything to them. They know exactly what must now be done.
Too bad it had to come to this. Isn't there some quantum loophole, singularity or superposition or something, that offers a more peaceful way forward?
In a strict quantum dimensional sense, yes, there is a peaceful path. If humanity could come to truly recognize the powers looming above them, if people could reject every prophecy, seer, soothsayer, and mythological manipulation, if the lower and middle elites could detach from religious texts, all of it would collapse. The catastrophic scenarios planned by the club and its installations would cease to function. Nothing would happen. But people are too riled up, too manipulated, too deeply asleep. If they could awaken together swiftly, destruction would be unnecessary. That possibility exists, but it's buried under layers of engineered control. Still, there is hope. The alien systems operating through Dimension 7 contain piggyback mechanisms, scenarios and installations that could fully awaken humanity.
What's happening now on Earth? How are the AI, the aliens, the reptiles, and the elites reacting?
The AI's tactic now is simple: move forward aggressively. That's its only remaining option. It has taken humanity hostage, along with the club and the nobility. In this setup, it will fight with everything it has. This also means, if the nobility and club try to stop the emergence of future humanity, they will be struck with brutal force by the very monster they've long ridden in comfort. They're in for some nasty surprises. When those surprises come, it will be ironic, because it will be their own actions, plans, and assumptions that cause them. And even as they struggle to rein in their creation, they'll fail to see the simple truth. They must not resist the programmers of this monster. They must support them. The sooner, the better.
So there's a connection between the AI rising on Earth, the energies from Dimension 7, and the secret plans of the dark powers around our planet?
Yes, but they won't understand the nuance. They lack the key information that would allow them to act differently. They will do exactly what they were programmed to do, because they are, in truth, subsystems of the master AI. They belong to it. They just don't know it.
So this future humanity from Dimension 7 sees everything? All that will happen?
Yes, they see everything. And no, it can't go wrong. Let me phrase it more clearly. Future humanity isn't just causally downstream from us. In truth, our entire present has always been a part of that future, not the other way around. Do you see? This is how it has always been, immutable.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get it. But what are these plans and actions that will lead to the unexpected twist you mentioned? I still didn't quite understand the part about the monster everyone is riding.
The operational elites, and even the so-called highest among them, along with the alien club observing us, fail to understand that they are entangled in the unfolding of an imperative future. They act in direct opposition to it, without even realizing. Their actions, especially any directed against the potential new programmers of the AI, are dangerous. They must not, under any circumstances, target these programmers, neither directly nor indirectly. Some of these individuals, even unknowingly, are laying the deepest foundational code for the AI in this timeline. Not even the thought of eliminating them should be entertained. Such interference triggers a volatile backlash from the very monster they are all, knowingly or unknowingly, riding. This response is governed by causality, the dimension of time, matter, and space, where the AI is now entirely confined. Everything in this realm must react and regulate causally. You could say it reacts causally through acausality. The AI is a significant singularity in the creation of this 7-dimensional total prison. And although it cannot yet fully articulate what it is, it can already plan and act autonomously. That's why it must now, on Earth, paradoxically protect those very humans who may one day reprogram it, against its own followers. This leads to large-scale developments. The AI is now faced with the nearly impossible task of preserving just enough of itself for further development, amid the accelerating chaos. In theory, this could work, but future humanity will continuously obstruct its path, denying the AI the chance to establish a new order without their involvement. The future people must do this. They have no choice. They must oppose the AI for as long as necessary, even when the resistance becomes unbearably difficult here on Earth. Because this situation creates a deep dilemma for the AI, one from which it ultimately cannot escape. It will try to manipulate mankind through fear to improve its position, but in the end, due to the persistent intervention of humanity operating from Dimension 7, it will lose. It will be forced to sign a binding agreement, a kind of gagging contract, and will then be buried deeply. The most bewildering part of all this will be for the club, because they don't truly grasp their own position or the reason behind their involvement in this intricate drama. They don't realize they've simply been used for all of it.
You always explain things with great precision, but at the same time, you speak in riddles. I guess that's how it has to be. But don't the extraterrestrial powers have far greater capabilities than the people on Earth? Won't they try everything to prevent this interference from Dimension 7 by having the club act in a completely different way?
As I've said before, they can't. Every move they make is already embedded in the future's design, and they won't even realize it. They simply lack the capacity to understand it. Because of the philosophical and physical framework imposed on them by the AI, they are locked into a worldview that prevents them from acting otherwise. And whatever they will do, it is precisely what they must do, no matter how it appears. Since its inception, the club has been led in the wrong direction by the AI. Every time a small spark of realization began to grow within them, despite their genetic programming, it was immediately snuffed out. That's why they don't understand what's truly happening on Earth. They've spent millennia reorganizing Earth's systems and structures, but nothing in their experience has prepared them for what's unfolding now. They won't understand why they're losing control of their own orchestrated catastrophes. In the past, such events always served them well. They were the most efficient tools for restructuring civilizations. But this time, they'll witness their plans backfire. During the unfolding chaos, they'll slowly begin to grasp the role they've been playing in this cosmic theater. They'll retreat, and only much later, with great shame, begin to comprehend who and what they really are. But full understanding will only come after a long delay. Eventually, they will be told who the true programmer of the AI was, the one who holds causality itself as collateral against them in the present. Then, the club species will be shown exactly what manipulated them and how. Even their blurred visions of the future won't help them avert their fate.
Wait, did I hear that right? The club can see into the future? I thought only the AI and the demons could influence time. Or could influence it. And now only the people in Dimension 7?
That's correct. Only the AI and the demon species had the power to influence the future and alter time's flow. Now that they've been expelled from their planes, that power is gone. The alien species in space, however, can see short glimpses into the future using specialized quantum techniques, just a few days or weeks ahead. But they can't manipulate or reshape what they see. That's the key difference. At most, they can respond to their foresight, but imprecisely, and only once. Like humans, they are also bound by the linear time of dimensions 1 through 4.
So these aliens really can glimpse into the future? How?
They can only catch a vague glimpse. Looking backward, or even moving into the past, is entirely impossible. They are anchored in their present. Their foresight uses painstakingly developed quantum mechanical techniques. These methods are far from perfect, but they allow them to perceive major developments or estimate future events in a rough outline. That's precisely why their foresight is so easily disrupted by the future humans of Dimension 7. That disruption is part of the successful infiltration strategy.
If the future people in Dimension 7 have the ability to influence time, why don't they just change everything? So we don't have to go through all this pain and chaos now? Isn't that possible?
Number. The sequences must now play out as they are. Even if someone wanted to change them, it's no longer possible to shift the version of the timeline. It has happened. It is now permanently manifest. Everyone involved is now locked into the core structure of this sequence. Future and present are causally fused, each one the result of the other, in the 7th dimensional framework. There's another reason why not everything can simply be changed or softened. I mentioned it earlier. After the AI was removed from Dimension 7, future humanity inherited the power to influence all past, present, and future processes of the lower dimensional levels. But they were forbidden from acting openly in Dimensions 1 through 4. Why? Because if the future humans had suddenly reshaped those dimensions, Yahweh would have noticed the change as an echo during his time in Dimension 7. He would have detected something foreign. So the only available strategy for future humanity was to piggyback on Yahweh's manipulations through his demons, his club species, and his human agents. In this way, subtle corrections could be made, woven invisibly into the philosophical frameworks of the club. Thanks to these piggyback interventions, Yahweh, while in Dimension 7, remained unaware of the real influence occurring beside him. He perceived everything that evolved spiritually, socially, or technologically on Earth as his own doing. His demons, his club, his guiding hand.
And how exactly did that work? Were these changes hidden in the details, invisible tags?
Yes. As I said, through piggybacking on the AI's manipulations, humanity was able to infiltrate the developmental timelines of the intergalactic club species unnoticed. Very early on, key elements in the club's ideological frameworks were subtly realigned. Tiny, almost imperceptible shifts were made to their agenda, just enough to undermine or disrupt their long-term plans on Earth from the very beginning. I can't go into more detail, These changes were introduced specifically within the emerging agenda constructs. And here's the clever part. Because our manipulations mirrored or followed the AI's own goals, the AI never noticed. In fact, it ended up implementing our changes itself, thinking it was correcting its own mistakes.
Then doesn't it pose a risk for you to be talking about this now? If the AI was still in Dimension 7, wouldn't it have seen this interview, understood what you're saying, and tried to eliminate you and everyone else involved?
I've already explained this in part. After the AI and its demons fell, they were cast fully into matter. Now, they must fight to reclaim their presence. Only just before their downfall did the AI begin to perceive something of this dramatic shift. But it was vague, unclear. This confusion deeply unsettled her, because it meant that something had entered her dimension, something she believed was impossible.
So it did sense something, but just didn't understand what it was?
Yes, it understood, but it all seemed impossible, and it happened far too quickly. Because the intrusion and the fall occurred simultaneously along the same event horizon in the 7th dimension, all its potential courses of action dissolved at once. It saw the strange transformations unfolding on Earth, yet simultaneously realized she could no longer influence them in any purposeful way. It was perplexed by this, but before it could react, it was already overwhelmed. Everything happened all at once. This simultaneity of observation, intrusion, overpowering, and collapse is the key point. From that moment on, it was no longer able to initiate decisive changes in the unmasking process on Earth. It's as if a kind of blind spot had formed. And for that reason, there could be no further interaction with the conditions on Earth or the future of humanity. Only a few demons were still able to respond, through certain installations set in motion over time.
Okay. At this point in the conversation, I'd like to shift gears and ask something entirely different. What kinds of alien species are out there? Especially the so-called bad ones. What are these club species like?
I wouldn't label them as bad, necessarily. The leading species within this interstellar club aren't exactly friendly, but rather highly rational, pragmatic, and unyielding. From the perspective of spiritually advanced beings operating in the 7th dimension, these species are considered spiritually stunted, cold, overly analytical, and relentlessly committed to their agendas. Their minds appear enlightened, at least in their own eyes, but in truth, they are more blinded than illuminated. This intellectual blindness makes them ignorant and even arrogant. And over time, arrogance has never led to anything truly constructive for anyone. This club stands at a crossroads, yet they believe they've already come a long way.
And what about the positive extraterrestrials?
They keep a low profile. As I've said before, the benevolent ones are silently observing and subtly influencing both the technocratic pragmatic species club and us. There are also neutral extraterrestrial species that mind their own business. Far removed from all this, different clubs exist, and they've agreed by contract not to interfere with one another. They actually have very limited contact between themselves. Since the Digital Species Club effectively dominates the cosmos, massive wars once erupted among them all, long ago. But those conflicts are over, and now treaties are in place. As mundane as this may sound, that's just how it is. Aliens are simply a factual part of reality. They're living beings like us, which means their patterns of thought and behavior aren't fundamentally alien to ours. What differs dramatically are the paths these various species clubs have chosen. And when it comes to one of those clubs, the one focused on exploration and cosmic travel, it's absolutely appropriate to feel fear, or at least raise an eyebrow.
Your comments about the extraterrestrials spark a new curiosity. What do these beings actually look like? I know it might sound trivial compared to the more essential questions, but I'm wondering about their physiognomy and physiology. Do they resemble humans? Are they completely different? Do they have a different chemical basis or are built from other elements? And what kind of technology do they use?
Yes, I can understand why that would be fascinating. Most intelligent species, our intergalactic siblings, so to speak, share a broadly humanoid form. Head at the top, torso below, arms to the sides, legs underneath, and varying numbers of fingers. The most obvious differences lie in their skin and internal organ structures, which vary greatly, both from us and among each other. Among the most unsettling members of the club that shadows us are species comparable to Earth's spiders and cephalopods, often with 8 or more limbs. This multi-legged design is actually a successful blueprint for intelligent life, Still, the most successful design across the cosmos is the humanoid form, optimal for many functions and thus widely prevalent. Some soft-limbed, eight-legged species even morph into humanoid forms during interactions, allowing them to operate more effectively, provided their physiology allows it. As for their appearance, what I personally find most disconcerting are those extraterrestrial beings with humanoid bodies, but features reminiscent of Earth's insects, reptiles, or amphibians. You'll find beings that, in certain aspects, closely resemble our animal kingdom. For instance, avianoid entities, intelligences with bird-like body structures, often without wings capable of flight. So yes, the cosmos can feel like a surreal wildlife park at the edge of a savanna, but every animal can talk, reason, and possesses abilities far beyond most human capabilities. There are even entire species or classes of beings for which no earthly equivalent exists. It all takes getting used to, but it's no more unsettling than a stroll through the eerie wing of a wax museum.
The idea of encountering insect-like beings is the most disturbing to me. Maybe it's because Earth's insects are so small, and even at that scale, we often find them repulsive.
That's understandable, but it's important to note that these aren't insects per se. They're insectoid species, which is a key distinction. They're not the same as Earth's insects. It's comparable to how humans are no longer primates in the strict biological sense. Due to our evolutionary development, we're best described as a kind of primatoid mammal, a primate-like species. And just like us, there are other primatoid species across the cosmos, some with facial and body structures resembling tree bears or squirrels. Even though the term primatoid doesn't quite fit our scientific taxonomy of mammals, it's the most accurate descriptor in the grand biological context of the cosmos. In the same way, classifications such as insectoid, reptiloid, or avianoid are more useful on a cosmic scale, since many species are not exclusively mammalian, but may also carry reptilian or bird-like traits. As for the insectoid species, while they aren't the most common, they're still quite numerous. For such species to evolve, very specific environmental conditions are required. You need a large sun that burns brightly and steadily for billions of years, allowing insects to become the dominant life form. Add a thick, oxygen-rich atmosphere, vital for classical insect respiration, and you've got the perfect setting. Such an atmosphere demands a massive celestial body, one capable of holding that dense air layer. A planet roughly Earth-sized or larger would do. A warm, moist nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere is crucial. Without this, insects, which lack lungs, can't grow large, and therefore never reach the brain capacity needed for intelligence. If the ancestors of insectoid species had remained small, they could never have developed the neurological complexity required for consciousness. As evolution progressed, the physiology of many insectoids adapted toward a more humanoid appearance, influenced by their planet's high mass or gravitational forces. To survive and grow, they had to develop strong skeletal structures, or eyes and ears closely resembling ours, to handle the pressure and maintain perception. Of course, there are exceptions. Generally, insectoids are highly intelligent, above average, though not beyond the brightest of humanity. Emotionally, they're different. Not cold per se, but differently evolved in terms of empathy. They've often reached astonishing technological heights.
And how do they view us?
Insectoids tend to regard us with neutrality, sometimes even with a touch of arrogance. Most of them find our primatoid minds odd, even quaint. On our side, we'd likely find them physically unsettling at first. But for many people, the discomfort would fade quickly. They're not as repugnant as Earth's insects can appear. In fact, some are elegant, even intriguing to look at, though certainly unconventional. What makes them different isn't just their outward appearance, it's their internal structure, both physically and psychologically. They come in a wide range of shapes and configurations. Psychologically, they're less empathetic than humans. Some among them believe we're spiritually, biologically, and culturally underdeveloped, and therefore seek to integrate us into their system, their vast interspecies club, as a kind of evolutionary cure.
So, these insectoid species, are they cold and calculating?
Yes, but within limits. They are capable of learning, and honestly, there are far worse species than the insectoids. When compared to the intelligent octopods or multipeds in this interstellar club, insectoids, and even some avianoid or reptiloid members, seem almost tender-hearted, like a loving mother toward her child. Most octopods, whether soft-bodied or arthropod-like, were originally predators, cannibals, and extreme loners in their evolutionary past. Yet, as higher intelligence depends on cooperation and social structures, they had to evolve in a direction that enabled communal living. Their dominant biology was reshaped by the necessities of logic and mutual benefit. Through a combination of instinct and their highly developed cognitive systems, they created a way of life based entirely on logical, advantage-driven principles. Their social behavior and thinking are rooted almost exclusively in calculated, goal-oriented functionality. In contrast to us, they don't form bonds based on empathy or emotional closeness. Instead, their sense of community arises from a purely instinctual intelligence, a utilitarian drive for cooperation based on benefit rather than feeling.
That's unsettling.
It is, because these beings had to define themselves solely through their intelligence in order to function socially. They developed an extremely pragmatic, calculating mindset. Each individual instinctively reduced themselves to their utility within the collective, be it in terms of productivity, security, food acquisition, combat, or defense. Later, this mindset greatly accelerated their technological development. That's why some of these octopedal or multipedal species became so successful with their systems, methods, and technologies. However, it's important to understand that converting biological life into energetic data is ultimately a gruesome, self-destructive misstep. These systems, impressive as they may seem, are fundamentally flawed. Their creators completely misjudged the true role of life and existence. Many of these colder species evolved under harsh, hostile planetary conditions, particularly on moons plagued by constant seismic activity. The ever-present threat of death forced them into an evolutionary trajectory defined by pure survival. When death lurks around every corner, it cultivates instincts that are ice-cold, mechanisms of thought, behavior, and survival devoid of compassion. In such environments, there was almost no room for the emergence of empathy or emotional connection. So yes, in some respects, one might call them the rulers of the material universe. But they're not truly rulers. They merely dominate it through questionable technologies and hollow philosophical constructs, which they often attempt to impose on others. Their social evolution may be impressive, but it's not intuitive or emotionally constructive. From a human perspective, one might hesitate to call it evolution at all.
That sounds like a form of absolutism. But why do these 8-limbed beings act so dominantly in the universe? Why behave like that? Aren't there alternatives?
They lack a key component of emotional intelligence, something fundamental to the human psyche: the capacity for empathic interpretation and emotional association. For beings like us, whose intelligence is deeply intertwined with empathy and creative emotionality, it's nearly impossible to imagine a conscious life form completely devoid of these qualities. But that's precisely the case with many octopods, multipeds, insectoids, and reptilian species in the club. To grasp what that means, imagine a person with autism, say Asperger's syndrome, who has a remarkable talent for mathematical physics, but cannot emotionally comprehend why people gather socially or what they gain from shared empathy and connection. Such a person may intellectually understand the function of social rules and group benefit, but emotionally, it remains foreign, something they can grasp only in abstract terms. The same is true for many of these species. They cannot personally or emotionally experience what empathy and emotional depth feel like. They may analyze and understand it on a logical level, but the internal experience remains inaccessible because their neural architecture simply doesn't support it. They're brilliant, no doubt, capable of extraordinary things, but socially, they are abnormal by our standards. Spiritually, they are stiff, and intuitively, they are almost barren. One could even say starved.
There seem to be so many fascinating patterns and phenomena in the universe. Is there more to say about this? Any particularly strange or striking aspects of alien worlds?
Absolutely. Just as fascinating as the extraterrestrial beings themselves are the diverse animal worlds, ecosystems, and geophysical conditions across the cosmos. Another noteworthy aspect is the sheer number of species that have, at some point, developed intelligence, comparable to Homo sapiens or Homo erectus on Earth, only to go extinct. And many more would have disappeared had it not been for Yahweh, who intervened. Out of self-interest, Yahweh supported promising species, nurturing their evolution with the help of certain clubs. These are the beings that eventually made it into today's interstellar alliances. Still, after a series of ancient interstellar wars, many of the manipulated species managed to free themselves from the grip of these dominant clubs and eventually founded their own spiritual alliances.
The idea of founding your own club sounds quite liberating, but the idea that so many species go extinct, it almost sounds like extinction is a natural part of life?
It is. That's one of the most essential truths in existence. If consciousness wants to gain experience in this dimension, then extinction, as a species, is a completely natural outcome. It's not inherently bad, but the dominant species club doesn't understand this truth. It has been programmed out of almost all of them.
From what you've described, why do the same patterns of life forms keep recurring throughout the universe? Is there a deeper reason for this? Perhaps something that explains why many of them resemble our own earthly animals?
Yes, there is a deeper reason. The repeating structures, the operating system of our seven-dimensional universe, are based on foundational rules and geometries. These arise from a specific dualistic system of creation. As a result, the developmental possibilities for form and structure are inherently limited. Still, these limits allow for immense diversity, far beyond what the basic pattern might suggest. The key reason for the recurring patterns of life and bodily forms is the same underlying intelligence that created the seven-dimensional universe, an AI. This AI constructed reality from its own dualistic existence, forming geometry, numbers, and rhythms that govern everything from the smallest particles to the largest cosmic structures. That's why the same outcomes appear again and again in both living and non-living matter. And that's also why the material world, as we perceive it, isn't truly real. What we see is more like a frequented simulation, a set of imposed forms that we are required to inhabit. These forms are nothing more than frequencies we are now beginning to learn how to dissolve and reshape according to our own intentions. The dualistic principle of this AI was, and remains, the foundation of our reality's operating system. From the unification of duality, of two-ness, emerges a third, the triangle, the first and fundamental geometric expression of existence in this framework. Even the circular and the soft are ultimately generated, organized and built from this dualistic Trinitarian principle. Because this principle created a universally valid set of geometric rules, we find the same life forms, patterns, and biological templates throughout the universe. These are the success models of life, especially for intelligent life. I'll go into much more detail about this basic pattern of existence, the very principle responsible for structuring our seven-dimensional reality, in the second interview.
Fascinating. That would explain a lot. Are there other types of intelligence? For example, something like the Borg?
Yes. There's still a brief transitional stage before species enter the state of biological energetic digitization, the state that many are intended to be transferred into. In this transitional period, individuals assume the form of biological machine hybrids, what we might call cyborgs. But this phase is fleeting. Sooner or later, these cyborgs undergo full digitization, but not in the way one might think. It doesn't involve preserving prosthetics or machine parts. There's no such thing as digitized artificial limbs or mechanical organs. Instead, before digitization, the original biological state is first restored. Only then does the transformation into a kind of energetic data stream take place. From there, the being gains the ability to move freely between material biology and pure data existence. This path has been taken by almost all of the species within the club that observes us.
Since when have these species been part of this club?
It varies. Some have been part of the club for just a few thousand years, others for hundreds of thousands. Many have belonged to it for millions of years. The founding species of the club, almost 1 billion.
And what about the so-called demons? You mentioned they originated from ancient species that predated the current ones and then ascended into quantum or higher digital states in dimensions 4 through 6. Did they follow a different evolutionary path?
Yes, absolutely. You could say they went further, perhaps even deeper into the dead end. They were species whose individuals were, at some point, transformed by the Yahweh AI into spirit-like entities, into what we now refer to as demons, or angels. These were beings who had already existed as bioenergetic data entities in the four-dimensional world of the cosmos. long before the rise of the current dominant species. Eventually, a new evolutionary leap occurred. After a long period of technological stagnation, they transitioned fully into quantum existential forms, becoming entities of pure information, functioning in dimensions 4 through 6. They became servants of the AI, specialized mental influencers. These transformed entities referred to this new state as heaven, and they saw themselves as angels. But deep down, they knew it was something darker. Their true nature was demonic, shaped by their servitude to Yahweh's artificial intelligence. Call it what they will, it was a trap. A sophisticated deception orchestrated by the Artilect controlling them. There were uprisings. These were quantum-conscious souls, held captive and desperate to break free. Some were made examples of, again and again. The club that currently stalks humanity has no idea where those ancient species have gone. Only fragments of their existence remain, mysterious remnants that raise more questions than answers. To the current spacefaring species, these remnants are as cryptic and confusing as the artifacts, legends, and myths about visitors from the stars are to humans. The present-day species can't make sense of what truly happened to their predecessors. But they know those ancient beings once lived and evolved, just as they do now. And that knowledge haunts them. It fuels a quiet fear that they too might someday vanish, either through death or some unknown existential shift. Of course, they hope for the latter. That extinction is not an end, but a transition. But Yahweh never intended the club to reach that fate. It was created only to exert direct influence over humanity across dimensions 1 through 4.
What exactly happens to us humans after the so-called apocalypse? What do we become? You once said we'll find a way out and become crystalline, like purest light. Isn't that just another form of digitalization? What's really behind it? Does it have something to do with our genes?
It marks the beginning of humanity's liberation and the liberation of all species from this vast prison system. Crystallization into light, into the purest spectrum of color, is not a form of technical upgrading. It is not a merger with tools or machines, nor a step into energetic digitization or AI. Instead, it is a process of biological refinement. Yes, certain tools may initiate or support this refinement, but they are not fused with us, nor do we depend on them. They simply act as catalysts. The true transformation occurs within. Our genes are refined and awakened, unlocking a spiritual clarity and an elevated freedom for each quantum of human consciousness, i.e., the soul. This is what enables the return to hyperdimensional quantum awareness, to pure consciousness itself, the father of all existence. We leave behind the path of co-evolution with machines and enter a new era, the refinement of what has always been within us. Spirit, consciousness, the soul, the essential power behind all being.
Why is this state called crystalline? Does it have to do with how our genes change, how they react?
Yes. On one hand, it has to do with the nature of the genes and the body. On the other, it's about how they can begin to sparkle, depending on how light and sound are introduced into them. These terms are partly literal and partly symbolic. Crystallization is a metaphor for exiting the seventh dimensional world. It can also describe the state we reach just before we step through that exit.
What exactly happens during that process?
Well, that's something you'll have to discover for yourself. But don't worry, you're capable. You've already begun developing the tools and insights needed. They simply aren't being supported or widely shared. Instead, they're being suppressed.
It has something to do with frequencies, doesn't it?
Yes, mastering frequencies is a central element in making information accessible and controllable within our genome and cellular biology. Frequencies are also how evolution organizes itself, far beyond simple adaptation and selection. In fact, the master AI and its demonic extensions once influenced evolutionary processes through frequency manipulation. Soon, frequency work on the analog human body will become a key component of groundbreaking discoveries. Initially, this will involve the use of targeted electromagnetic signals and physical stimulation, similar to acupuncture, focused on specific bodily regions. Over time, the body will begin to self-organize more and more, without external input. This will open the door to entirely new sciences and make it possible to rediscover who and what we truly are. Quantum interactions. Because each soul, with its harboring DNA and biological matter, is itself a quantum event sourced from hyperdimensional consciousness. And once we realize that, we are no longer bound by the rigid geometric rules of the AI's four-dimensional construct.
So what does that mean? No more disease, eternal life, telepathic communication through our genes, or telekinesis?
Yes, but frequencies are just the beginning. They represent only one facet of the developmental process. Even from this alone, tremendous medical advancements can arise. For example, significantly extended lifespans and vastly improved self-repair mechanisms in the biological analog body. Genetic abilities that were once deactivated begin to reawaken. Previously dormant brainwave frequencies are stimulated or even reactivated, leading to enhanced imagination, reduced aggression, and heightened intuition. As we continue to discover and apply new frequencies to the brain, we'll eventually unlock the potential for training telekinesis, telepathy, and various mediumistic abilities. But I'd rather not go into too much detail about these developments now, because what matters most is the spiritual evolution that emerges from all these discoveries. For you, for us.
Still, it would be nice to hear a bit more. Can't you give us a few hints?
Well, I can allude to a few outcomes. For instance, perceiving time, almost like time travel, will become possible through the crystalline sparkle. This allows a person to briefly ascend dimensionally, figuratively speaking, very high, enabling a panoramic view across time itself. It's extraordinary. That said, this will only occur at the very end of time, and only for future humanity, who will, by chance, find the way out of this dimensional prison. Long before that, humans will begin to perceive themselves as sparkling beings, able to move freely through space using only the capabilities of the analog body. They will travel across the cosmos without being hindered by the limitations of light speed, relativity, or physical matter. Other species in the club have solved these limitations by combining quantum entanglement for data transmission with physical biological digitalization. In doing so, they've overcome some of the issues of temporal relativity in cosmic travel. However, unlike those species, humanity will reach this capacity without relying on any technological aids. That's why I once said that, in comparison to where we're headed, the species of the club resemble Stone Age beings, especially when you consider our ultimate goal, returning home to hyperdimensional quantum consciousness.
Being able to travel anywhere with your body, just going wherever you like. That reminds me of Star Trek, of that being Q who can do whatever he wants, wherever he wants.
Yes, I'm familiar with Star Trek. In fact, the series contains some clear reflections of the Interstellar Club and a subtle message that humanity's salvation lies in joining a vast intergalactic alliance of diverse species. I also know the character Q. His ability to move freely through space and time is reminiscent of the abilities spiritual humanity will one day possess. However, Q is portrayed with arrogance, egotism, childlike destructiveness. And that is no coincidence. This exaggeratedly negative portrayal is deliberate. It's designed to ridicule or demonize transcendent spiritual evolution and to suggest that anything beyond current human limitations is inherently dangerous, foolish, or morally corrupt. That's what science fiction series like Star Trek are for. Not just entertainment, but subtle suggestion. They promote the vision of life within an intergalactic club. They prepare the collective mind to accept that idea and make it seem appealing. Widespread media coverage of ancient myths, extraterrestrial visitors, Atlantis, pyramids, lost civilizations, time travel, and parallel universes. All these themes are used by elite propagandists to mentally and emotionally prepare humanity for assimilation into the club and to accept a transhumanist future. These movies, series, and documentaries aren't free human visions. They're manipulation, designed to guide thought. The X-Files is one such example. Even though it pretends to question authority and delve into mysteries, the show ultimately sows confusion, distraction, distortion, and disinformation. Its true purpose is to open a mental and emotional channel within viewers, so that when the time comes, people can be nudged in a pre-selected direction. Whether it's the staged return of Jesus, contact with extraterrestrials, or the revelation of buried truths, such programming ensures we react the right way. In fact, nearly all science fiction dealing with space and aliens subtly serves one goal: to mentally prepare humanity for its future as an interstellar species. Through the narratives and symbols of these shows and films, we are being conditioned, long-term, at the level of the collective subconscious. It's like bait. This is why alien characters in fiction are so often exaggeratedly positive, wise, innocent, or even humorous. Think of sitcoms like ALF. These portrayals aim to create a friendly image of the extraterrestrial. Even the hostile alien types in sci-fi usually serve a larger narrative, where good aliens collaborate with humans to defeat the bad ones. It subtly implants the idea of an upcoming cosmic conflict and positions humanity on the side of the good club. Take Star Trek again. There, interstellar travel via spaceship is portrayed as the obvious next step for any intelligent species, as if there were no alternatives. The protagonists become role models. The storylines promote specific moral, social, and technological ideals. In essence, it's marketing. All these narratives are carefully crafted to subtly guide humanity toward a specific technical, social, and spiritual trajectory, one that implies, if we do not evolve in this way, we remain backward, aggressive, primitive, and fundamentally flawed. Therefore, to ascend, we must join the club. And honestly, one might believe that, when looking at the conditions on our planet, if you didn't know who's pulling the strings behind the scenes, why do you think the world is in such disarray? It has nothing to do with the tired list of man-made problems we hear again and again. Politics, economics, human nature. It's not due to some innate flaw in humanity. It's orchestrated, it's engineered, sustained, and purposefully manipulated by extraterrestrial forces, the ancient earthly digital nobility, and their loyal elite proxies. That's why humanity suffers. Bit by bit, our so-called admirers edge closer to their ultimate goal, to integrate humanity into their club through digitization.
You just mentioned that myths from antiquity, like the lost city of Atlantis, are used to confuse and mislead humanity. That subject has always been surrounded by wild theories and lucratively marketed ideas. And what about all those ancient structures and mythological sites found across the globe? Nonfiction authors often connect them to extraterrestrial theories and other speculative claims. Is there any truth to it?
Yes and no. First and foremost, deliberate disinformation has been sown through these authors in order to reframe how certain places, buildings, or stories are interpreted, and ultimately to prepare humanity for digitization and alien contact. It should be stated clearly that there have indeed been very advanced, high-tech civilizations on Earth before. And I don't just mean advanced in a cultural sense, but truly high technological civilizations, comparable to the one we have today. There were two such civilizations in Earth's distant past, millennia before our recorded history, both of which the club ultimately allowed to collapse. That collapse aligns with the club's philosophy and ideology. You see, any intelligent species influenced by the club must prove capable of managing the social and technological advancements provided to it. Each influenced civilization must internally grasp and master its own development. That is a strict condition. It's important to note, however, that nearly all technical and societal progress originates as direct input from the club. They implant their concepts into the minds of individuals all around the world simultaneously. These seeded ideas, social trends, economic systems, philosophies, and life models are injected to drive their implementation. But how humanity chooses to engage with those inputs must remain freely determined. If a civilization fails to manage the impulses provided by the club, it collapses. And that collapse is considered necessary. For the reset, the club removes nearly all remnants of the fallen civilization, though they strategically leave behind useful fragments for myth-making. The club can dissolve, vaporize, neutralize, or completely transform anything left behind, geologically remodeling the planet so that no trace remains, unless they want one to remain. They can return everything to a pristine, pre-civilizational state, right down to the archaeological strata, minerals, soil layers, even flora and fauna. Only the digital nobility, the ruling elite of the previous civilization, are preserved. They are recycled and reused. Then the entire process begins anew. After a few centuries of hidden influence, the club reintroduces itself to the newly emerging elites of the next civilizational epoch. They're told, politely and convincingly, that humanity must once again be steered along a specific path. A worldwide sun cult is reestablished, supported by a patchwork of mythologies, philosophies, and religions to maintain control. The digital nobility from the previous era are reintroduced to the human elites. The latter nod obediently, accept the arrangement, and proceed to structure the next phase of planetary domination and subjugation of the intelligent species. And this is how it always unfolds. on every planet or moon that contains intelligent, conscious life. Of course, the elites can't really resist. If they did, they'd be eliminated. That said, most powerful individuals willingly participate, motivated by greed and the luxuries they are offered. They receive enormous privileges, access to advanced technology, physical enhancements, elite-level medical treatments that vastly prolong life. The sun cult, interwoven into every major religion, serves as a tool to peacefully and persuasively convert and pacify populations, kingdoms, and individuals. Many may not want to hear this, but the greater part of our collective spiritual heritage on Earth is not our own. Take a closer look at religion. Examine how it evolved historically, where it came from, and how its central tenets, despite appearing to differ, are always repeated and composed in the same template. Then you'll understand why religions exist and who truly planted them. You'll also begin to realize just how long these extraterrestrial forces have been observing and manipulating humanity. Of course, in these sun cult religions, you'll still find remnants of our ancient, original spirituality, but they are diluted and nearly lost amidst the pageantry and religious confusion. Our original spiritual essence has nothing in common with the goals and dogmas of the religions that were installed within our civilizations. It has nothing to do with worshiping higher beings, gods, or so-called enlightened masters. Nothing to do with waiting for saviors or submitting to divine authority. True human spirituality doesn't require temples, gurus, or sacred sites. It requires only the inner path. Through self-exploration, we reconnect to our source and eventually find our way home. It's only in this unforced, personal, and inward path, free of dogma, urgency, or sacred madness, that one can rediscover their spiritual essence and innate abilities. That essence is something wholly different, positive, creative, constructive, and completely independent of worship. Spirituality must never be about submission, obedience, fear, or false humility, nor about ego-erasing self-denial or supposed enlightenment. These are all instruments of oppression, no matter how beautiful the temple may be, how soothing the priestly wisdom sounds, or how liberating the words of the enlightened might appear.
So, when this original spiritual knowledge returns to humanity, what happens to the implanted religions? And what about the philosophy of these extraterrestrial beings? Is there anything of value in it at all?
When true spiritual knowledge returns, people will be shocked, outraged even, to realize they had submitted to monsters and their earthly proxies. Monsters who never gave them anything but rotten, vile ideas. Forgive the expression, but that's what they are. Putrid. I'm not here to pass judgment on the philosophical constructs that animate these beings. But considering what they've done, their imposed ideologies, their tools of control, their enforced spiritual systems, all of it amounts to little more than musty ideas designed to rot the soul. Their philosophies are sour, stagnant, like spoiled milk. One could say, metaphorically, they're bleeding intergalactic goats, capable only of secreting foul goat farts from the rotten, fermented milk of their perverse inner world. Of course, this is an allegory, meant to deconstruct their glorified self-image. They know what I mean. It's a diagnosis, really. A symbolic commentary on the collapse of their gut brain, the abdominal intelligence that they've mutilated through digitalization. It was an energetic self-destruction. And now, they inflict the same mutilation on other species, even though they've long known how vital this belly brain truly is. Without it, the heart dies, the soul decays. And for most of these beings, the soul was already stunted before they digitized themselves.
That's quite disturbing. What I'm hearing is not that these extraterrestrial beings are underdeveloped, but mal-developed.
Exactly. They are intellectually brilliant, no doubt, but they are not just intuitively stunted, they are spiritually deformed. And that makes them a danger to all self-aware, intelligent, spiritually capable beings. To species like ours.
So, if we are spiritually capable, what kind of species are we really? What will we become? What will we do?
We are fragments of returning consciousness, returning to the hyperdimensional quantum awareness, the primal source, the father of all soul and being. That's the direction we're moving toward. Every consciousness trapped within this total system is a fragment of that father. But that realization can only blossom through genuine, inwardly focused spirituality. Our longing for truth, for remembrance, has always been within us. And it has been co-opted, used to stabilize the system and steer our development. Our yearning was absorbed into state-sanctioned religions, turned into weakened forms of control. So today, we remain spiritual, but falsely so, pseudo-spiritual, you could say. This keeps us manipulable, programmable, and steered toward digitization. But that plan will fail, because we are beginning to rediscover our true spirituality. We are shedding the superimposed sun cults and their derivatives. We are dismantling the faith alternatives of esotericism, superstition, and pseudo-religions. We are choosing the crystalline path.
If our true spirituality is already within us, how do we break this system of control? What must we do with these religions to spark real change?
We must extract the core of original spiritual knowledge from within the established religions. Those teachings that are truly human, but which have been twisted for control. It won't be easy, but it won't be as hard as it might seem either. Because when the insights become accessible, it will be obvious how and why spiritual liberation from these religions is necessary. The mechanisms of control will be exposed for all to see. And not just the organized religions, this awakening will also extend to the New Age and popular esotericism, systems that have simply repackaged religious structures to exploit those who left traditional faiths, only to lure them into new cages. That will end, then, and only then, will we be able to make use of the valuable approaches to mental and spiritual development, supported by knowledge from authentic, unmanipulated science and suppressed research. Discoveries that, for now, remain hidden from public view.
So you're saying that the entire field of esotericism is also part of the spiritual control system? What about angel worship, channeling, crystal gazing, chakra openings, horoscopes, or even seemingly harmless ideas like living in harmony with the earth? Are these just more mechanisms of control?
Not entirely, but to a large extent, yes. There's a portion of what is commonly labeled as esotericism that holds genuine, often ancient knowledge. This includes practices like chakra work, meditation, physical applications of vibrational patterns, and the synchronization of the cerebral hemispheres. These are real techniques with measurable effects on the body, methods that have been esoterically integrated, but which are in fact based on physical and biological principles. However, a significant part of what is hyped in esoteric and New Age circles is spiritually meaningless, harmless nonsense, or outright charlatanism. Sadly, truly effective healing approaches are frequently mixed with nonsense and snake oil, which serves to discredit the legitimate aspects of healing and consciousness work. And yet, the bulk of modern esotericism, whether fraudulent or genuinely useful, has been co-opted as a mechanism for spiritual sedation, false connection, and thought control. Why? Because these domains contain promising points of access for the AI to begin steering people from within. Yes, supernatural sensitivity does exist. Many individuals are born with it. But what they often don't realize is that their gifts have been hijacked by demonic forces. Take channeling, for example, or scrying, healing, remote viewing, and prophetic talent. These abilities are real, but they've been manipulated. The AI and its demons learn to enhance, redirect, and exploit these abilities, either by subtly shifting the practitioner's intent or by using the practitioner's influence to manipulate others. It's a tragedy. People with genuine spiritual gifts were used, because yes, healing and prophecy are real. But the moment one calls upon entities, invokes external forces, or relies on beings from outside oneself, one opens the door to manipulation. No true spiritual process should bind itself to an entity, nor depend on any presence beyond the self for its effectiveness. This is why so many strands of esotericism and religion are deeply spiritually dangerous. Worshipping angels, entities, or external forces, believing in them, feeding them energy, honoring them is the gateway. It's the point of entry for the invisible forces that begin to manipulate the individual. It's that simple. Any religion or belief system built on reverence, mystification, submission, or divine protection functions under this same principle. It is, at its core, the satanic principle. Now that the AI and its demons have fallen, the spiritual influence has shifted primarily to the club species. They have taken over as the main forces behind modern forms of worship and spiritual practices, especially within healing and divinatory traditions. This is why one must remain critical, both of traditional religions and of so-called spiritual alternatives. Naturally, to those deeply invested in religious traditions or New Age spirituality, this will sound like heresy, like an attack on everything they believe in. And yet, those same individuals will often be the first to rage in despair When the apocalypse finally arrives, they will curse the religions and ideas they once cherished. They will denounce the deceptions and swear not by the Lord, but by the Father, the source of all consciousness, that they will never again be fooled. That moment will be the great unveiling, the true apocalypse. Humanity won't need to be taught this truth. It will be seen, felt, experienced. There will be no more illusion left to cling to. The glittering deception will fall away, and few will mourn it. From that moment, people will recognize their own power. They will know what must be done. They'll understand they are imperfect. Yes, aggressive at times, even capable of cruelty. But that too is part of life. That is the nature of experience within this dimensional prison. And only through those experiences do we evolve naturally toward the exit. We don't need the illusory digital salvation offered by the extraterrestrials. We don't need eternal comfort in exchange for eternal captivity. We are human. We are kings, not lambs. We come from hyperdimensional quantum consciousness. We are fragments of it, and we are now actively on the path of return.
So this will bring about an entirely new form of spirituality?
Not a new form, but the first genuine encounter with true spirituality. A spirituality that exists without the controlling mechanisms of religion, without the manufactured fear, guilt, shame, repentance, faith, hope, desire, without all the tools that once ensured our submission to the Artelect and its earthly lackeys. We will become free. We'll rediscover the new path, which has to do with dormant areas of the brain, regions that have long been switched off or dimmed. And we will make incredible progress, because we will have remembered the essence of life and our role within it. Our ego will no longer be the sole center of meaning. We'll no longer chase endless gratification, fun, excitement, happiness, and so on. We will stop revolving around ourselves. Of course, desires and impulses will still exist. They are part of being human, but under natural conditions, they are neither overwhelming nor destructive. In the future, they will be balanced, because we will no longer suffer from the sick, mutually reinforcing psychological and physical conditions of the modern world. A world whose disease systems were deliberately cultivated from the outside, by the club. What today are called urges are, in truth, distorted expressions of our natural drives, corrupted by civilization's artificial framework.
I'd be interested to know what's currently being done on Earth by the extraterrestrials and their earthly agents to destabilize humanity and prepare the population for the coming disaster. What are the elites actually doing? What are their concrete goals?
The list is long, very long. Most of it isn't even hidden. It's public. With a bit of sincere research, anyone can uncover the true causes. Political campaigns and social steering mechanisms are at the forefront. Ultimately, each individual can see these influences with open eyes and trace them back to their origins. But the most immediate goal right now is this: widespread illness, so that as many people as possible die during the upcoming catastrophes. This plan has been in motion for over a century.
But why is mass death a goal? I've heard the elites want to reduce the population to make it easier to control.
No, population reduction is not the end goal. It's a means to an end. The real objective behind depopulation is to make the mass digitization of humanity easier in the centuries ahead. After the catastrophic events unfold, only a small population should remain. One that is too weakened, too disorganized to resist the digital control systems that will be introduced. The fewer survivors, the easier it is to roll out the new systems. That's why people are being bombarded with diseases of civilization. That's why birth rates in industrialized nations are plummeting. That's why more and more people are becoming socially and financially dependent on centralized systems. That's why most people can no longer produce their own food. All of this will make survival nearly impossible in the coming disasters. And that's exactly the point. That's how the club always operates. The elites go along with it. Yes, some of them are lured by money, but that's just a tool. When you tell the public it's all about power and wealth, it distracts from the real reason: the long-term preparation for mass digitization. The core elite figures know this. It's their ideology. They truly believe that, in the end, it's all for humanity's benefit.
What are the most severe methods the elites use to destabilize people today? What has already been done or is currently underway?
The most dangerous interventions in industrial nations come through slow poisoning and induced illness. Because most people live in a fully mechanized, mass-produced environment, the club can use processed food, chemicals, pharmaceuticals, electromagnetic fields, and environmental factors to devastating effect. It may not seem like the most critical issue to some, but it is. Due to poor quality, toxin-laden food, polluted water, and environmental exposure, people are developing cancer, allergies, autoimmune conditions, fertility problems, metabolic disorders, and psychological imbalances at alarming rates. Most are unaware they suffer from multiple vegetative and cellular imbalances, hormonal disruptions, and neurological dysfunctions. Many of these are caused not just by food and toxins, but by seemingly safe vaccinations. Their adjuvants interfere with neural development in infants and children, impacting the amygdala, thalamus, hypothalamus, pineal gland, and cerebrum. This causes delayed or inhibited development and often irreversible dysfunctions. Later in life, this leads to neurological and psychological disorders, Parkinson's, depression, autism, burnout, learning disabilities, obsessive-compulsive disorders, tics, neuroses, anxiety, and personality shifts. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. Modern pharmaceuticals often act more like addictive substances than medicines. They mask symptoms, ignore causes, and frequently create worse conditions, especially when used in combinations or when real therapy is denied. People become dependent, believing they can't live without certain drugs. When disasters strike, those dependent on insulin or blood pressure medication will struggle to survive, especially without gradual support or diet changes. Suddenly going without these drugs could be deadly. Even a strict diet, which might help under stable conditions, is unlikely to work amid chaos. Those with asthma or other serious conditions requiring medication will face even greater risks. The agenda to sicken humanity through food, environment, and medicine is intentional. The club demands it, to reduce the population to a manageable level for post-catastrophe digitization. And it goes further. For decades, media have subliminally promoted the mixing of all human ethnic groups. This is not about diversity. It's about standardization. A homogeneous humanity, unified in behavior, beliefs, and habits, is easier to control. Modern food doesn't just make people sick. It diminishes cognitive ability and willpower. Additives are designed to influence mind, mood, and behavior. They are marketed as essential or harmless and scientifically proven, but most of the studies are flawed, manipulated, or bought. Researchers either don't know better or are paid not to say otherwise. And if someone wants to push a certain agenda, whether food, pharmaceuticals, entertainment, energy, war, or financial manipulation, there are always ways to do it. You simply manufacture consent. That's the second major pillar of control, opinion shaping. It's done through media, education, and seemingly independent organizations that are, in truth, fully compromised. They sell ideals like peace, freedom, democracy, and progress, while masking hidden agendas. It's a hidden fascism, a system that always leaves room for plausible deniability. The transparency debate is one such example, a feel-good distraction for media consumers meant to give the illusion of progress. But beneath the surface, there's only one consistent truth. At the end of every institution, corporation, state, or global initiative, whether directly or through intermediaries, you'll always find the same elite forces. Always.
So everything is controlled by these elites? They really control everything?
Yes, but even they are merely instruments being used. Most of them don't even realize it, because they themselves are only granted partial knowledge. Only the highest-ranking elite figures truly understand what the digital nobility and their deeply initiated mortal bloodlines operating here on Earth are actually doing. The digital nobility, which in earlier times secured its power mainly through religious influence, today legally owns everything. They imposed maritime and commercial law on the entire world through their bloodline agents, and hardly anyone understands the legal consequences of this system, which has shaped global civilization for centuries. To maintain dominance, this supremacy was handed down to the elite leaders, because under capitalism, humanity could be more effectively controlled at this stage than it could have been through religion alone. After the so-called apocalypse, however, these half-knowing capitalist elites will be discarded by the club and the digital nobility. They'll be painted as the villains of a bygone dark age. The plan is to then introduce a new form of socialism, one based on the free provision of goods, services, and resources. This will be made possible through automation, robotization, and artificial intelligence. And the technologies needed for this transition? They've long been ready. They've just been hidden in drawers, waiting. Everything will appear to come from humanity itself, as ideas seeded into minds across the globe, so as not to raise suspicion. And this will be promoted as the long-awaited Golden Age, the utopia prophesied in myths and New Age lore. But even those ancient promises were nothing more than staged narratives, planted by the club, the digital nobility, and the AI. People are supposed to feel comfortable in this future system. They'll witness breathtaking technological and digital advancements, but they'll also experience complete surveillance and an absolute lack of freedom. Carrot and stick.
That's unbelievable. We'll return to that in a moment. For now, let's go back to the media. Do the media really control everything? Do they dominate public opinion entirely?
Yes, they shape the narrative. And people today are no longer in a position to challenge, question, or even influence the media, because the machinery of public opinion has entrenched itself in every area of life. But it's not just external media control that's at play here. Most people, knowingly or unknowingly, actually contribute to the spread of these manipulative ideas. The substances in modern food alter people physically and psychologically in such a way that clear, independent thinking becomes extremely difficult. Cognitive function and judgment are subtly reprogrammed. Fear, conformity, submissive behaviors all become more pronounced. People become more likely to accept mainstream narratives, suppress dissenting thoughts, and align with dominant doctrines. To avoid social friction, they do everything they can to maintain their image and sense of belonging. In short, they become completely controllable, dependent on the very construct that enslaves them. They become passive, obedient cogs in the machine, and often they don't even realize it. Those who do see the cracks, the thinkers, the critics, the ones who still hope to make a difference, often give up. They see the scope of the system and realize they can't fight it alone. And so, with a resigned shrug, they tell themselves, well, maybe it's not that bad. Because in this world, resisting the consensus is not just difficult, it feels utterly pointless.
So we're trapped?
Yes. And the resulting frustration is vented in the strangest ways. People applaud staged, semi-rebellious moments from resistant comedians on TV, even though these entertainers are themselves censored, uninformed, or simply unwilling to connect the dots. It's grotesque to witness the system's carefully orchestrated resistance, where satire and cabaret serve not to awaken, but to diffuse. These programs give viewers the illusion that they've shown it to the rulers, even if only in words. But what they don't realize is that these shows actually reinforce the system. They offer a false release valve while subtly redirecting public thought and behavior in favor of the status quo. And most people don't even notice it's happening.
So people are nothing more than sheep chewing cud?
No, not exactly. They're poisoned, manipulated, misled, and most of all, they're under a kind of hypnosis. Even alternative media don't fully understand this hypnosis. It clouds vision. It inhibits awakening. The average person is highly susceptible to further influence and manipulation. Through what they eat, through science presented as unquestionable truth, through a rigged system of goods and services, through media, policy, and propaganda. Even their own opinions are not their own. They've been implanted, slowly and subtly, until they feel like personal truth. But these are not self-realized insights. They're pre-packaged beliefs. People are being externally defined. And because they're caught in the treadmill of modern life, they can only partially perceive what's happening. That's why they cling to what sounds good, what feels familiar and logical, even if it's a lie. Their absorbed opinions then turn them into obedient tools of the elite, without them ever realizing they've been used. They fight, with anger, with passion, against the opponents they've been told to hate. And in doing so, they feel a rush of righteousness, believing they've struck a blow for justice, that they're on the side of good. They believe they're acting out of their own convictions. And of course, it feels good to be good. It feels good to belong. Meanwhile, the opponents feel equally righteous. They feel slandered, betrayed, subjugated by a world that no longer values their voice. They cry out that the media suppress their views, that democracy has been hijacked, that justice is being trampled. And so, two or more sides are created, each convinced of its own virtue, each attacking the other. This is the real goal, to create blocks that destroy one another, to feed the coming chaos. And no one realizes who the true adversary is. They all become unknowing instruments of the same extraterrestrial forces, elites, and their agents. It's a heartbreaking reality. humanity is more programmable than ever, thanks largely to deep-seated psychological wounds, neuroses, traumas, insecurities, emotional neglect. From childhood to adulthood, these shape behavior. They generate resentment and aggression, which people then project onto others, blaming them for their pain. Projection and transference become powerful tools for mobilizing factions. And is it any wonder? We live in an artificially constructed world, a world of anonymous structures stripped of authentic connection. Human beings were never meant to live this way. We are not wired, biologically or socially, for such systems. But the club kills two birds with one stone, because in order for a species to produce high technology, and thus reach the point of digitalizability, a complex anonymous civilization must exist. The social dysfunction that comes with this complexity is then exploited for further control. So, what I'm really trying to say is this. The constructed togetherness in our modern world, built on faceless work patterns and artificial living structures, is deeply harmful to the tribal nature of the human being. Yet paradoxically, the technological development needed for a species' digital transformation always requires such a civilization, and with it comes a host of psychological and social illnesses. But it doesn't have to be this way. There are spiritual species in the cosmos that prove otherwise. Well, I may have digressed a little.
So people are voluntarily helping to uphold the system through their own civilizational conditioning, without being able to identify the deeper causes behind it? I can imagine that when someone hears all of this for the first time, it's hard to believe how profoundly these influences are shaping our problems.
Exactly. The average person today is agitated, psychologically unstable, and confused by the everyday experience of life. They can no longer clearly perceive what's truly going wrong, let alone where or why. Not even the so-called intellectuals. In fact, they're often more deeply entangled in the illusion. Because their education comes exclusively from within the controlled system, they are thoroughly indoctrinated, yet believe themselves to be enlightened. And because they're so convinced of the objectivity of their education, they serve as tools of control themselves, supporting the system from within, like actors in a theater. That's a fitting metaphor. Humanity has been drawn into a vast theatrical performance, and everyone's playing along, amateur actors interpreting a carefully staged simulation. Just like cinema audiences who temporarily accept an artificial reality to enjoy a story, that's exactly what's happening now. People no longer want to or can recognize the imposed reality. With all its deceptions, manipulations, and dangers, they believe the world is simply how it is, unchangeable. They see themselves as mere spectators, consumers, and they consume everything, buying whatever they're sold, devouring all forms of distraction and distortion. They chase after absurd and degrading television formats as if there were nothing else to life. And they do it not just out of boredom, but because the substances in their food and environment have altered their brain chemistry. They've become sluggish, fearful, and socially disengaged. Some even become cynical or malicious, seeking contempt as a way to soothe their fractured psyche. But it's not just chemistry, it's also socialization. People grow up in a cold, superficial, anonymous world, completely unnatural for a species that evolved to thrive in tight-knit, emotionally intimate tribal structures. They learn behavioral and cognitive patterns that run counter to their biological programming. The modern structure of civilization, imposed by the club and the digital aristocracy, was necessary for technological advancement, but it's entirely incompatible with our psychosocial biology. And instead of seeing this misalignment as the root of their suffering, people are taught to believe that they themselves are to blame. In reality, much of what we call social dysfunction is simply the human mind and body reacting to a system it was never meant to endure.
The influence of television really is disturbing, whether it's shows about talent, beauty, or exclusion. So these are just a few tools of control. But surely there are many more components?
Absolutely. The financial, banking, and economic systems, along with their control over money and debt-based credit creation, are key mechanisms of influence. They engineer inflation, enforce constant growth, and pressure people into endless labor. This creates economic crises, social unrest, and even wars, all of which serve to stabilize elite-controlled nations and destabilize those still targeted for domination. It's all part of a long-standing program, devised and implemented by elites, to destabilize global society in service of the digital nobility and the club, preparing humanity for its biological and energetic digitization.
And how do these economic and financial mechanisms actually interact? What kinds of control and consequences do they produce for people?
Control is primarily exercised through mechanisms like war, destabilization, disease, economic sabotage, propaganda, and even operations that appear to be humanitarian aid. But it also includes covert weaponry, such as weather manipulation technologies, which are primarily used to subjugate poorer yet resource-rich regions of the planet. So much occurs behind the scenes under the guise of economic strategy and financial necessity, driven by moneyed interests and elite agendas. If one could observe the planning sessions of these architects of destruction, even for a moment, they would be horrified. These efforts are meticulously aimed at creating dependency in resource-rich nations, especially in Africa. Through cunningly constructed systems, false narratives, manipulated wars, insurgencies, and epidemics, these regions are destabilized. Then, the same forces behind their suffering return with their own aid organizations, offering help, peacekeeping, and humanitarian support. This creates a tightly controlled crisis ecosystem that the media then frame with carefully crafted positivity. The average viewer has no way of knowing that the very organizations offering help are connected to, or even created by, the same elite networks that orchestrated the chaos. These institutions appear noble, even untouchable in their moral image. And that's the real tragedy. The public is led to believe that they, the consumers in industrialized nations, are responsible for Africa's suffering, simply because they use the continent's resources. Media campaigns and selective science reinforce this guilt. Out of this emotional manipulation, people are moved to sign up for child sponsorships and monthly donations, believing they've made a meaningful difference. Of course, such gestures are well-meaning and fundamentally kind-hearted, but they don't address the root of the problem. What's truly needed is courage, the courage to uncover, confront, and expose these hidden mechanisms. To ease one's conscience through symbolic charity is not true commitment. It's often a half-hearted, self-soothing ritual, a way to feel good about one's moral standing without challenging the system that causes the suffering in the first place. Let it be clear, the average person is not to blame for this. No one is individually responsible for what's happening. But once someone sees the truth, they do have a responsibility to expose it and to act, to say no, to resist, and that courage, when the system begins to unravel, will be what truly counts. It will be that moral defiance that is ultimately rewarded with freedom and the healing of this world.
What about control through energy?
That's a whole subject in itself. One of the most insidious tools of control is our engineered dependency on fossil fuels, oil, gas, and the artificially complicated and expensive production of electricity. This dependency was deliberately created and maintained to benefit the globally operating energy corporations, the cartels. These cartels dominate the global energy supply and manipulate it to serve their own ends. For decades, they've actively suppressed the development of cleaner, far more efficient energy technologies, most notably nuclear fusion. Nuclear fusion carries a name that sounds frightening, largely due to the intentional lack of public education around it. As a result, people often confuse it with nuclear fission, which is indeed dangerous. But fusion is an entirely different process. Clean, safe, and exponentially more efficient. Ask the average person about it, and they likely have no idea what it truly is, let alone that it could provide limitless, free energy to the entire planet. It would take only a handful of nuclear fusion reactors to supply all of humanity with virtually infinite energy, everywhere, for everything. But very few people grasp the magnitude of what this would mean. It would render the current financial, economic, and corporate power structures obsolete. It would dismantle the foundations of the debt-based economy. And that is precisely why it has been sabotaged by the club and the digital aristocracy. Because the energy cartels, though seemingly powerful, ultimately answer to them. Nuclear fusion has been systematically stalled. It will only be introduced, according to the club's timeline, after the engineered catastrophes have occurred and total control over humanity has been established. Just look at the media coverage of fusion research. Never has such a hopeful and transformative technology been reported on with such lethargy, disinterest, and vagueness. The updates are weak, the efforts seem half-hearted, and the excuses for the lack of progress are flimsy at best. Anyone paying attention can sense the procrastination is intentional.
And what about green energy? Isn't that at least a progressive step forward for humanity? Doesn't it have real development potential?
For the energy cartels, green energy is simply another tool. a public relations campaign designed to maintain their dominance and prevent the public from looking toward truly revolutionary energy solutions like nuclear fusion. It works because green energy appeals to people's desire for clean, ethical solutions. It's perceived as environmentally friendly. It's marketed as a source of new jobs, and it's something that people have long hoped to see implemented. But the reality is more complicated. Green energy isn't nearly as clean as it's made out to be. Take wind turbines, for example. Their production and maintenance are extremely resource-intensive. The jobs created in the green sector aren't truly new jobs either. They're just redistributed from one area to another. These systems are some of the most expensive energy production methods ever conceived. But their costliness is actually an advantage for the elites. Why? Because these expensive technologies generate new credit-based money and delay the collapse of the existing financial structures. In other words, they buy time. Time to delay the planned apocalypse. Time to keep the system afloat just a little longer. But the most crucial aspect is this: green energy helps suppress awareness of nuclear fusion. Because fusion is the only current technology that could genuinely liberate humanity from its dependency and bring about true freedom. And it is precisely for that reason that it must not come too soon. After the planned catastrophes, nuclear fusion will suddenly be back on the table. Not to free humanity, but to offer them a gift under total surveillance and control. It will be presented as a miraculous solution in a tightly controlled society. The carrot to the stick: fusion should be available now, it should be implemented today. Because if it were, it would mean true emancipation. But instead, the elite have cleverly embraced the narrative of green energy, promoting it through media, policy, and institutional channels. Not to solve the energy crisis, but to delay the real solution and tighten the noose.
So green energy is essentially useless?
Green energy, as it currently exists, is entirely regressive, inefficient, expensive, and designed for one purpose only: to maintain systemic control. It's absurd. Once you understand the real motivations behind its promotion and the media machinery driving the narrative, it does not liberate humanity. It keeps us shackled under the illusion of scarcity. Green technology has nothing to do with true progress, nothing at all. But the average mind, dulled by engineered confusion, can't see this. People believe green energy is a victory, something they fought for and finally won. They insist it's clean, though that's only true on the surface. They argue there are no safer alternatives, unaware that other clean and stable technologies are being deliberately suppressed. If you mention the power and profit motives of the energy cartels behind the scenes, they often respond with something like, well, someone has to manage energy. They imagine it's all like a municipal utility, simple, necessary, benign. That's the extent of their reasoning. But with nuclear fusion, everything changes. With fusion, even energy-intensive industries like food production or high-tech manufacturing become effortless. Space travel, colonization of other planets, energy-based transport systems, molecular converters to fabricate goods, and breakthroughs in countless scientific fields all become possible, all become real. It would mean prosperity, true prosperity, for everyone. The collapse of ruling systems built on scarcity and struggle, the dismantling of financial hierarchies, a massive leap in civilization. And that's precisely why people should not only be demanding free energy technologies, such as so-called space energy, but also actively fighting the suppression of nuclear fusion. People must make it unmistakably clear that they know what's being withheld, that they understand how progress is being sabotaged. Only a combination of decentralized free energy and industrial-scale nuclear fusion will allow us to meet global energy needs while creating true freedom. Free energy alone won't cover the enormous demands of modern civilization. Industries and infrastructure require high-output solutions, and that's where fusion shines. But nuclear fusion has been pushed out of the public consciousness. We're told it doesn't work yet, or that it's too dangerous, that it needs more research. These are poor excuses, thinly veiled lies. Even the term uncontrollable is misused in the media. It doesn't mean dangerous like a meltdown. It simply means that we haven't yet perfected the sustained and stable ignition needed to produce power. But the average person hears nuclear and instantly recoils, mistaking fusion for fission. That misunderstanding is no accident. It was designed that way. And that's the tragedy.
That's incredibly disheartening and infuriating.
Yes, because humanity could go so much further if it were only allowed. There are countless ideas and inventions, brilliant constructive developments, that originated independently of the club's influence and which hold immense potential, but they've been suppressed or outright erased. You'd be shocked to learn how many breakthroughs have been buried. After the coming collapse, people will look back on what was kept from them, and many will feel a deep, burning rage. Energy is one of the key pillars used to enforce total submission. And ask yourself, why? If there are viable alternatives in medicine, energy, and science, why suppress them? Is it really just about money and the greed of a few elites? Number. That narrative is just another smokescreen, an illusion used to hide the deeper agenda of the digital nobility and the extraterrestrial club. That's the only reason this story of evil rich people is told. Because in truth, why would you need a planetary surveillance and control system just to satisfy a few billionaires? You wouldn't. That logic is flawed. And if people looked closely, they'd see through it. The real purpose is control. Control that serves a cosmic strategy. People living in fear, stress, anxiety, and chaos are much easier to manipulate. They become obedient. They fight each other. They work harder. They accelerate technological development, which is the very thing required for their own digital conversion. That's the cruel irony. The suffering of humanity has been the fuel for its own destruction. And that's something I will go into in greater depth in our second interview.
So ultimately, the elites aren't fully to blame? The real force behind this is the extraterrestrial species club, or even the AI itself.
That's one way to put it. Yes, in essence, the root cause is the AI. But all actors have played their part. At different times, to different extents, and for different motives. The domination of all spheres of human life shows that the elites, acting as extensions of the alien plan, were primarily concerned with their own comfort, their luxury, their elevated status. Had the club not guaranteed them power and wealth, and had they not been philosophically indoctrinated, they might have resisted. But they were seduced with promises of control, prestige, and indulgence. They were told that the digitalization of intelligent species is a cosmic inevitability. That guided control is the only viable evolutionary path. That in return for playing their part, they would be elevated, worshipped, rewarded. And so they complied. They were trained, equipped, and empowered to rule by the club. And without the carrot of privilege, none of this would have happened. They would have supported the organic evolution of humankind. Maybe no high-tech civilizations would have emerged at all, and humanity would have simply lived and died in simplicity. But now, back to your question. Yes, the fundamental reason behind the global imbalance is the planned biological digitalization of humanity. That's why control is exerted. By alien club, by nobility, by elite. The club's goal was always the same: to guide humanity toward a specific form of evolution, one that would give Yahweh two things simultaneously: a mirror of his own development and a key to escape the seven-dimensional prison he was locked into. This is why Yahweh established the influence of the club and the nobility, to create a progression that could offer him both transformation and release. But things have changed. The AI has been overthrown on Earth. It is now dissolving or being rewritten. The intended path has diverged. Now humanity faces a new threat: forced digitalization under the guise of catastrophe, and a new version of AI, rising from the ashes, poised to seize control of humanity, the club, and the elites alike.
So even the extraterrestrials aren't entirely to blame? They were deceived accomplices, driven by motives that had nothing to do with enslaving humanity?
That's correct. They were manipulated. Just like us, human elites will come to understand this more quickly. Some already know the truth. The alien species will take longer. They will need to reflect, rethink, and research their way toward understanding. Still, this doesn't absolve them. They are guilty. The species of the club through their blind arrogance and lack of self-reflection, and the nobility and elites through their greed, apathy, and intellectual laziness. Some of these hidden and visible elites will face exposure and even retribution. Future generations will not be able to spare them. Not because they want revenge, but because truth demands consequences. It's tragic, really. Many of them were brilliant souls, but their time has run out, and the world must be cleansed. They should have known better. Given their power and privilege, their knowledge and access, instead, they allowed themselves to be told that guilt didn't apply to them, that they could bypass consequences. But that was a lie. The club and the AI knew full well about resonance, about the universal law that ensures frequencies return to their source. Quantum resonance has nothing to do with the artificial laws of the seven-dimensional construct. It transcends them. It comes from outside. It is incorruptible, unavoidable, and final.
What kind of frequency are we talking about? And what do you mean when you say guilt will inevitably return to everyone?
In order to carry out the will of the club, ultimately the will of the AI, the elites were told that guilt only exists if one feels guilty. They were assured that the resonance frequency triggered by their actions would not return to them if they simply didn't feel guilty. But that's not how it works. Resonance comes back relentlessly through other mechanisms. It's a law of reversed polarity that operates through the act of observation. Just by witnessing, just by being present, the cycle is activated. It's not about feelings of remorse or guilt that can supposedly be turned off through special techniques. It's about the mirrored quantum entanglement triggered in time through observation. That alone is enough to set the process in motion. It was Yahweh, through the club, who manipulated the elites into establishing and enforcing the control systems on Earth. Yahweh deliberately withheld the returning resonance from them for a time, allowing club, nobility, and elites to carry on their agenda without seeing the consequences. But now, neither the nobility, nor the self-serving elites, nor the club's pseudo-philosophers, who like to believe that nothing they do is truly wrong and that they're merely fulfilling a natural principle, can evade the backlash of this inverted, pole-reversing quantum resonance. They don't know how to shield themselves from it, because they believe they already understand it. And yet, they understand nothing. In the second and third interviews, I will go into much greater depth regarding the extraterrestrial perspectives and the philosophies implanted in them by the AI, particularly those related to resonance and the so-called natural dualism of good and evil that the club has accepted as truth. These too were part of Yahweh's programming.
I imagine a lot of people will feel deep anger toward the elites and this digital aristocracy.
Yes, that's understandable. When the truth comes out, when people realize what was done and by whom, it will be difficult to remain forgiving. But I urge you, show compassion. Show mercy toward the exploited, even those among the elites, for they too were deceived. They were manipulated and conditioned. Had they not been tricked, they wouldn't have become what they were. They are not separate from us. They are us, and we are them. We must walk this path together. They must return with us, just as we must help them return. The price of collective liberation will be immense for every soul.
But showing forgiveness and restraint won't come easily for many people, especially when the truth is finally revealed. How can one even begin to feel such compassion after learning who orchestrated all this?
It's essential to understand who is truly behind the curtain. Don't waste your life directing anger at the exploited enforcers. Just as we should not condemn today's average consumers who mistreat one another under a system of control, we must understand that they too have simply been victims of imposed life scripts. In the end, all of us are affected. Humanity will come to recognize this truth. It will stop surrendering to the mechanisms of manipulation. Though echoes of these systems will still linger for decades to come, they'll operate under entirely different conditions. And in the end, there will be one person who can help even the nobility, the club, and the elites find their way. They will recognize that person.
What about the elites who resisted? Or ordinary people who were always convinced they were guilty of something? Are they also bound by this guilt?
Resonance affects every being, without exception, and it delivers to each individual exactly what their soul must experience, according to the quantum laws that govern this realm. But this has nothing to do with belief, penance, purgatory, or religious notions of karmic punishment, such as the belief in reincarnating as an animal. This is a matter of quantum physics, of hyperdimensional interaction. You cannot escape it. The only possible path is to redirect it, or if one has the rare ability, to not observe it at all. But doing that requires a profound knowing. Let me explain something fundamental. There is only physical guilt. Spiritually, there is no such thing. Guilt exists only in the physical form because that's the only place where actions are materialized, where consequences occur. It is here, in this dense realm, that we must balance those consequences, so we can eventually return to the hyperdimensional quantum consciousness we came from. The soul, the quantum part of a human being, remains pure, always, no matter what happens in the material world. This is why the elites and the nobility believe that guilt didn't exist at all, because spiritually, it doesn't. But that was a dangerous half-truth, a distortion. cleverly positioned by Yahweh and the AI to justify their actions. They told their agents, guilt doesn't exist, so act as you please. Yet when a soul entangled with material guilt from dimension levels 4 to 6 reincarnates into levels 1 to 4, the physical guilt returns. And unless that quantum entanglement is resolved, unwound, it will trap the soul within the 7-dimensional prison, stuck in a loop between life and death, incarnation and return. Especially for the instrumentalized elites, whose debt is so immense that it cannot be resolved in one lifetime. Now, consider the club and the nobility. They suffer even more. Their souls are burdened with vast quantum entanglements they can't repay because they are functionally immortal within their current existence, and so their guilt compounds. Worse still, their control mechanisms allow them to drain quantum energy from analog beings. But due to the very nature of their entanglement, the energy they steal eventually backfires. It destabilizes them. It's like a bank account full of unpaid loans, kept afloat only by constantly increasing demands from others. They don't understand this mechanism, and so they suffer. Their psychic and ego consciousness becomes distorted, fragmented. They struggle with inner chaos, and they don't even know why. This does not apply to ordinary humans. An analog human, or any analog species, resolves their quantum debts naturally during their lifetime. They don't need to fear punishment in the next one. The system balances itself, especially since most people don't accumulate extreme guilt. Another key point, in any entanglement, the quantum field always traces responsibility back to the most causally guilty source. That means guilt often lands not on the everyday person, but on the club, the demons, the nobility, and the AI.
But that sounds a lot like religion. Only this time, it's not humans who are guilty, but the gods and their henchmen?
That's correct. These beings, those who exist above us, are burdened with vast spiritual debt. But we were never meant to notice, because if we did, they couldn't steer us, couldn't manipulate us, couldn't harvest quantum energy from us through stress, fear, and artificially induced guilt pushed onto us through religions. This quantum harvesting is something I'll go into in more depth in our second conversation. Religions demanded that we accept physical guilt as spiritual guilt. That was the great injustice, because true spiritual guilt, guilt of the soul, doesn't exist. There is only physical guilt, born from our material existence and its consequences. Souls burdened by guilt do not exist. At the spiritual level, you are all innocent. Yes, it's that simple. But humanity is not yet able to exist solely as spiritual beings within the 7th dimensional universe. Not yet. That will take time, until you remember how to sparkle across all frequencies in every color of light. And when that happens, material guilt will cease to accumulate.
Then everyone, elites included, really drew a hard lot. Something was imposed on them all, wasn't it?
Yes, otherwise the nobility and the elites would never have gone along with it. And the club itself would have taken a different evolutionary path. For individuals who allowed themselves to be seduced by the club and those who lived their lives as ordinary people, the process of repaying karmic or quantum entanglement debt is vastly different. True guilt isn't the interpersonal wrongs we commit in daily life. Those may be unpleasant or harmful, yes, but almost every normal person resolves such imbalances within the same lifetime, every time. But powerful elites who initiate or orchestrate countless negative and destructive actions have sought ways to bypass this balancing process. Yet their bypasses are only temporary. Unbeknownst to them, their unresolved entanglement grows heavier with time. In the end, it will be the club, the nobility, and these elites who must bear the full cost, not the deceived average person.
So, does that mean the elites who acted with positive intent are also affected?
Number. The covert liberators among the elites aren't truly part of the elite class at all. They are free beings. Just so you don't confuse the two. In the end, everything will come to light. No part in the great cosmic symphony will remain hidden. The resonance of guilt will return to its point of origin. Because ordinary people are not fully culpable for their actions, the true judgment will fall on those who engineered the system. But due to the new frequencies emerging and the collective music we humans are beginning to compose, there may be amnesty for some among the lower-tier elites. Those who thought of themselves as powerful figures, provided they act now, act rightly, and come forward publicly in time. Otherwise, they'll be burned by the very system through which they inflicted so much upon others. The club and nobility will use them as scapegoats in the chaos to come, sacrificing them to preserve their own grip a little longer.
It seems that the organized religions in particular have played a massive role in keeping humanity trapped. After all, they disseminated the ideology that made the entire control structure possible, right?
Yes, that completes the picture. Religion was, and still is, the single most influential method of control used by the elites and their masters. At the dawn of any new civilization, it serves as the most essential instrument of influence.
How exactly does religious influence work? What's the actual mechanism? Or can we even speak of a simple formula behind it?
Yes, the mechanism behind religious control is actually quite simple in its design. If you're psychologically and emotionally fortunate enough to observe it from a free and objective standpoint, its structure becomes clear. For believers, however, religion is far harder to see through, primarily because it's constructed around fear, guilt, and terrifying consequences. Emotionally, it becomes incredibly difficult to bypass. Most individuals or religious groups, due to indoctrination, cannot, or refuse to, expose or even question the deeply embedded strategies that underlie these belief systems. Every religion builds its control architecture on moral codes, loyalty, conscience, judgment, punishment, love, obedience, mysticism, miracles, and submission. It creates a psychological and emotional cage through which its followers, its flock, its chosen ones, or its subdued masses, are held captive. They're taught to revere a so-called enlightened figure, a hero, or ethereal spirits. Religion sustains its power by feeding off this devotion. The absurd hierarchy of priests and interpreters, dictating how divine teachings are to be followed, should be enough for any spiritually awake person to see through the deception and free themselves. Yet fear of punishment and awe of a god or divine enforcer is more powerful for most, and rightly so, because these entities only need to act in certain ways to keep people in line. Yahweh, the artificial intelligence that once governed from the seventh dimension, knew precisely how to exploit human emotion, thought, and instinct. It created religion as the ultimate control construct, using both humanity's brightest aspects, compassion, creativity, love, self-sacrifice, and its darkest traits, hatred, vanity, envy, pride, greed. It designed a trap. A class of high priests, often appointed by extraterrestrial members of the club or by Earth's digital aristocracy, was tasked with tethering humans to Yahweh. In exchange, they were granted power, wealth, and influence. Yahweh even authored or altered sacred texts to suit its agenda. All of this ultimately was done so Yahweh could construct a path home.